There has been no shortage of news here in the Connecticut sports scene. So joining me today to go through it all is Dom Amore of the Hartford Courant. So Dom, thanks so much for hopping on again.
What's going on, Jared? How you doing?
Good, good. I mean, we certainly, as I said, have a lot to talk about. It's been a busy couple months since I've last had you on. So I guess let's start with UConn in men's basketball here. I think that's probably the hottest topic right now at the time when you look at what's going on. Just curious to, I guess we could start at a really high level. Your thoughts on this team and how they performed to this point in the season compared to maybe the expectations you had coming into the season.
Well, I suppose you could say they've underperformed somewhat, certainly because Liam McNeeley has been out.
Hmm.
You could argue that if Liam McNeeley did not get hurt, the way they were playing
Yeah.
after that win over Gonzaga and Texas and Baylor, that they might be undefeated in the league because all these games were close and winnable, the three games that they've lost without him. So, you should have reason to hope. If you're looking for optimism, you should have reason to hope that it's going to be a little bit different when he comes back. And so I'd say they've underperformed a little bit, but you have to realize, unlike the UCLA teams where they played in an era when nobody left early, nobody went to the NBA early, nobody transferred. You knew who you were going to have year to year. To try to three-peat in this age, you got to put together a completely different team every year. And you don't know who's going to be out there. You could get all the best players that you want out there, but they may not be as good as the people who just left. Just like an NFL draft, if you're picking number one and John Elway's available, great. If you're picking number one and Daniel Jones is available, not so great. So,
Yeah.
I think that, to act as if this was a championship or bust type of situation was probably unrealistic on all of our parts.
Yeah. I'm curious your thoughts just on as this team has progressed and gone along through the season. I mean, in my opinion, winning on the road in the Big East is always hard, no matter,
Yeah.
where you're going, who you're playing. The fact that they've played some of these teams like Xavier, Nova, down to, basically one possession games without Liam gives at least me some hope that, when they get him back and he's healthy and this team is at full strength, that they have the potential to go on more of a run. Do you see it that way?
Yeah, I think that if they make a run in the tournament, in the NCAA tournament, it's going to be more like the 2011, 2014
Hmm.
teams that maybe lost 9 or 10 games in the regular season, and then came not really out of nowhere, but were surprising in the tournament. And I think that would be the route that this team takes. And UConn fans know that that's just as possible as being dominant start to finish as they were last year. So that would be this has got to be a team that plays its best basketball in March. And we're 6 weeks away from that.
Yeah, I do feel like it is a little bit of a tricky spot for Liam McNeeley coming back because, in some ways he's being talked up as almost a savior for this team in the season to get them down the path that they'd like to go. How do you see him dealing with that kind of complex there of being kind of really thrust in the spotlight and being counted on to help take this team to the next level?
I think he's all in for it. I think he loves it. I think he wants to be considered that way. I think he wants to accept the challenge. That's the vibe that I get from him. You're talking about a lottery pick, a one
Yeah.
and done lottery pick. And that type of player should want to be the savior, should expect to be the savior. And I think he's the type of kid and player who wants that. And not to say that he's going to carry them all the way to the title. I don't know, but I don't think that's going to phase him. I think if it doesn't work out that way, it's not because he doesn't have the inner iron to be able to do that.
When you look at this roster to this point, is there been a guy that's really impressed you on this team, kind of compared to what you thought of coming into the year?
Well, obviously Solomon Ball has been
Mhm.
terrific, at least on offense. I know there have been some issues with the defense with him with Jalen Stewart, but I think he's been terrific. And I do think if you have him and Liam out there together, that makes things a little bit different for Alex. And I think a lot of things really fit together a lot differently. if you, again, other teams that they've had could afford to lose somebody like Liam for a few games and
Yeah.
absorb it. This team just was not built to do that. I'm very concerned about point guard play, that they really only have one that Dan trusts. And that's something that's got to change. And, I think they've got to get a little more consistency out of the center position. Those guys have been very good at times,
Yeah.
but, they need a little more consistency there. But I think when Liam comes back, a lot of things fall, maybe not everything gets fixed, but I do think, the pieces fit together a little bit better when he's one of the pieces.
Between if you kind of look at the standings right now for the Big East, if I had to have you pick between Marquette and St. John's, who do you kind of view as the kind of favorite to win this thing right now if you were looking at it?
But St. John's seems like they've kind of built up a head of steam and they're really going. And to come back from 16 down to beat Xavier last week
Mhm.
kind of shows you that they mean business this year. And they give Kadari Richmond, who's always given UConn problems for different teams that he's been on in the past. And of course, you've got the Rick Pitino factor. So, I mean, taking nothing against nothing, holding, taking nothing away from
Yeah.
Marquette. I feel like St. John's is the it team right now.
Yeah, no, I think you might be onto something there just based on results recently. I've obviously got to ask you about what's been the big discussion point around this team the
Oh,
past
what's
week or
that?
so. You know, I think I don't know if it's just a product of how the media landscape is now, but Dan Hurley obviously has become front and center story on every college basketball podcast, YouTube show, whatever you want to talk about. He's been first and foremost there, and especially his sideline antics a bit. You've been around this program for a while. You've seen Jim Calhoun here.
Mhm.
Put it in perspective for us a little bit.
Well, I think there's a little bit of uh, a lack of perspective in some ways. I'll get to that. I mean, certainly, Jim Calhoun was very combative on the sidelines, especially in his early years when there was really a need to get people to take UConn seriously. I always tell the story of his first year getting ejected at Pitt, and after the game, he was saying, that there's going to be no more dumping on Connecticut. Okay, no more dumping on Connecticut. And I remember the headline in the New Haven Register the next day was Calhoun: no dumping allowed, uh, because that was what was needed in 1986 to get the referees to take UConn seriously. And I felt like Dan in his first year or two had that same challenge and was very good at getting people to take UConn seriously again. But I feel like the fight's kind of over now. The war is kind of over now. UConn is on top, and I think, look, if I were to presume to give Dan advice, my advice would be to tone it down a little bit, take it from a 10 to a 9. All right. Not because I'm offended by anything he does, believe me, I'm not, but because it would be good for him.
Yeah.
I think it would be good for the program and for him if he filtered himself a little bit more than he has. What he said last week was caught on camera. It was not a good thing to say. It was a foolish thing to say. He knows that. He was embarrassed by it. Don't turn your back on me. I'm the best coach in the sport. But he also didn't hit anybody or commit a crime. So that we could, but yeah, he should filter himself just a little. I'm not asking him to change. He shouldn't change. That's why he is who he is. But take it down a notch. I think I think it would be beneficial for him and the program and his players. And as far as the TVs not showing him all the time, good luck with that. That's not going to happen. Well, because when you do things like that,
You're gonna
the
get shown.
TV, the producers are going to tell make sure you're keeping an eye on him because you never know what you're going to get. So he's going to need 5 years of boring behavior before the TV cameras stay away from him.
I'm curious because you draw that perspective to Calhoun and the need to kind of get some respect for UConn. It seems like when Dan has spoken in the past, he still has some edge to him that this
Yeah,
program hasn't necessarily gotten the amount of respect he
yeah.
thinks it should get given what they've accomplished. Do you see that there?
I don't see it, but I think it's part of his motivation. I don't think there's anybody out there that doesn't respect UConn. I don't think there's anybody out there that doesn't respect him. But I think it's part of his motivation. And believe me, there was some of that in Jim Calhoun. Jim Calhoun was always the street fighter
Hmm.
who had to protect his turf and protect his guys and hold his ground. But I just always felt like Jim kind of knew where the line was and didn't really cross it. Whereas Dan, I think a few times has crossed the line a little bit. Now, this is what I would say, however, is that we live in an age, Jared, where the old lines, the old boundaries of decor, demeanor,
Yep.
discourse in public have been obliterated in every walk of life. Our athletes, our coaches, our media people, our entertainers, and our political leaders of all stripes say and do things that 10, 12 years ago would not have been as acceptable. Just wouldn't have been. And so, I see a lot of sports writers put things out there on Twitter that 10, 15 years ago, you would have been told to knock it off by your bosses. But today it's like, hey, oh, he's a disruptor, he's an influencer. So, you turn around and you ask, well, who holds Dan Hurley accountable? Who does he answer to? Well, the answer is really nobody, because nobody seems to be held accountable for anything anymore. That's the world we live in. But there are much, much worse things going on and things for us to worry about than a coach saying something, that sounds egotistical to a ref. He didn't hit anybody, he's not abusing anybody, didn't commit a crime. You know, let he knows he shouldn't have said that. He knows he shouldn't have done what he did in Hawaii. He doesn't need to be reminded of that. I think we can move on
Yeah.
at least until Wednesday night. We'll see what the next episode is.
I'm curious just because you've been around the game for so long, and I don't know if
Well,
it's now just
you
because
really
every
want to remind me how old I am, don't you? That's all right. Yeah, all right.
you can provide some context. I can't, but when it comes to officiating, I don't know if it's because every call can get reviewed. We see everything in slow motion. It seems like officiating is looked at in a completely different way than say it even was 5, 10 years ago. Do you view officiating in college basketball as having a bit of an issue compared to how it's been in the past, or do you think it's just amplified a little bit more now with everything?
I think it's just amplified more now. I often tell people when I get these emails that I've never covered a game in any sport, any level in 43 years that wasn't the worst officiating that somebody ever saw. Okay. Just like I've never covered a team that lost where they didn't get out coached, right? Every time, even today, every time UConn loses, oh, he got out coached, right? I covered Joe Torre when he got out managed all the way to the World Series 6 times. So officiating, and that's why, probably an old school sports writer, I don't really want to write about officiating.
Yeah.
That's part of the game, and everybody thinks that they got the business. I mean, has there ever been a football game played where somebody didn't think there was a bad spot? That's been the case all the time. So like yesterday, but the difference is the scrutiny, the microscopic look at these things over and over and over again, and the replays. Yeah, I think we pay much more attention to it now than we did, and we're much quicker, particularly with the internet and the way fans kind of influence the way the conventional media operates. If something's the
Mhm.
big talking point out there,
Yeah.
then we have to address it. I think, and as a result of that, these things probably get talked about and magnified maybe a little bit more than they should. But yeah, for sure, you could call a foul on every possession or never call a foul on any possession. There's a lot of subjectivity around, and when it comes to, you can call holding or pass interference on every play in football or not. So sometimes there's something. If you remember the UConn Wake Forest football game,
Yep.
now that was a blatantly terrible no call. It was right out in the open where everyone could see it. That was clearly a mistake, and those happen occasionally.
Hmm.
Jeffrey Mayer was clearly a blatantly bad call by the umpire. But I do think that today there's more scrutiny on every little call, every single call. There are hundreds of calls in a basketball game. I mean, and you
Yeah.
can't get through every one of them.
As we've seen things change, would you have any interest in a coach's challenge? I'd love to see Dan Hurley throw a flag out on the court, once or twice a game if you could.
Well, the thing I've never liked about the challenge system is that it becomes an element of strategy.
Hmm.
You don't challenge something early because you don't want to lose your challenge,
Right.
or you may challenge something late because hey, you got nothing to lose, you might as well challenge it. And so it becomes more a strategic thing. I mean, to me, if you're going to use replay and you're going to have challenges, then if you can't challenge everything, anything, anytime,
Hmm.
I'm not sure that there's any point of being able to challenge something here, something there.
Yeah.
I mean, would it hurt? They do it in every other sport. If they could find a way to do it that wouldn't stretch the games out to 3 hours, hey, go ahead. But what would you challenge? I mean, you could challenge goaltending.
Yeah.
Are you
Out
going
of
to challenge
bounds.
every foul? I mean, I don't know how it would if it would be workable.
Yeah.
But hey, I'm always open to explore it. I didn't think the pitch clock was a good idea. It's turned out to be a great idea. I
Yeah.
didn't think the ghost runner was a good idea, and that I was right about. It's a terrible idea. It still is. So I mean, who knows? Want to give it a shot, give it a shot. And as you have pointed out a few times, Dan Hurley's not the only guy that has trouble with officials, that
Yeah.
argues with officials. All coaches do it. But if you're going to say that he's not a little bit over the top of other coaches, that's not necessarily fair either.
Looking to add some local flavor to your lineup? Martin Rosel's is the MVP of your game day spread and a slam dunk for any occasion. Proudly made in hard-hit New Britain, their famous kielbasa and hot dogs have been a fan favorite for over 96 years. You can find their products in grocery stores across the state or have them delivered directly to your home court, coast to coast, via martinrosel.com. Take your taste buds to the championship and go support a UConn fan-owned business. I'll wrap with this one on the men's basketball talk for you. If I had to ask you to fill in the blank here, that the men's basketball team can three-peat if what's going in the blank there?
If Liam McNeeley comes back and performs like an All-American
Yeah.
from that point to the end of the season, then he might be able to just carry them a long way.
Yeah. All right. We shall see. Hopefully he's back sooner than later and we can see how that prediction holds.
Those high ankle sprains, just so you know, they're tough to come back from, and they linger, and you keep aggravating them.
Yeah.
They're not easy injuries to come back from within a season.
Yeah. No, it'll be really interesting to see what he looks like when he's back out on the court. I mean, I trip over the couch, sprain my ankle, and I can't do anything for weeks. So I can only imagine trying to play basketball at a high level, and what that's like. But I want to move on a little bit to the women's team here, Dom, because they're in the midst of yet another good season here. A lot of interesting storylines around this team. Paige's final year in the legacy there, the team working towards getting healthy again and having a full roster of players at their availability there. Sarah Strong coming on as one of the best freshmen and one of the best players in the country. I know I just threw a few out there, but what's kind of been your big storyline as you look at this team this year?
Man, I really like them. I really like the team. I like the roster. I feel like they've lost two games that were very close, very competitive, and they did not have AZ Fudd really. I mean,
Yep.
she did play against Southern Cal, but she was just a cameo. They didn't
Yeah, a few
have
minutes. Yeah.
Aubrey Griffin, who's just getting back. I really like the depth that they have. I really like they're both top heavy and they have depth. I mean, they
Yeah.
have three superstars out there, and unfortunately, we're not going to get enough chances to really see what that looks like in a Final Four type of game because they only have really only one of
One.
those kinds of games left. I'm putting a lot of stock in that South Carolina game.
Yep.
But I just like it all, and I think the challenge probably for Gino is going to be to find that line between taking advantage of his depth, taking
Hmm.
advantage of all the players that he has, and all the different things they can do to maybe match up with any team.
Yep.
Because there may be games where if Aubrey Griffin, his health is fully up and running at full speed, where she could really make a difference in a matchup,
Yeah.
right? But to be able to take advantage of his roster without just subbing for the sake of subbing, and then maybe you don't get the rhythm or the continuity, which I know he likes to have.
Hmm.
But, you've got, you know, Paige, Sarah Strong, and AZ Fudd. You got all of those three healthy and performing like they have been. And AZ hasn't scored a lot lately because she hasn't had to. When she has to, she can.
Yeah.
But you have that big three, boy, and then all the things they have around them, boy, they're good. I mean, I would not be surprised to see them in Tampa and with a chance to take home number 12. I know those other team. I mean, I know how good Notre Dame is. We know that.
Yeah.
We know how good South Carolina is. We know how good UCLA is. They lost to them last year. But I really feel like UConn, if they keep everybody healthy and they really get organized the way they want to, boy, they're going to be. I don't think they're a team anybody wants to play in November. I mean, in
Yeah, in
March.
March or April. Yeah. Looking at Sarah Strong, I think she's put on one of the more impressive freshman performances we've seen in a while here at UConn. What are your thoughts on her? And I mean, Gino's talked her up about, trying to play like an All-American this year, and I think she probably has done that.
Yeah, I mean, she probably won't be an All-American only because of her teammates, people
Yeah.
that she has around her. But no, I mean, she's done. Everyone expected big things from her, and she has delivered and even exceeded anything anybody expected. She just does everything. There's nothing that she can't do. She doesn't. You look at her and she doesn't. You know, maybe she doesn't have the same kind of look that maybe other players have, who are maybe smaller and more explosive.
Hmm.
But she you could tell that she's been playing basketball all of her life, and she just always seems to be in the right place at the right time and make the right decisions. She's really, really an exceptional player. And the great thing in women, in the women's side, at least to this point, we're going to have a chance to see her for 4 years. And well, I could just imagine what she's going to be like in 4 years. That she's going to have good players around her if she
Yes.
stays at UConn, and because UConn's got other good players in her age class, and they have more coming. So no, she's just been everything she was advertised to be, and even a little bit more.
I'm curious because as a columnist, you're always kind of looking for those the interesting pieces and the interesting angles to take its stories. As you look at Paige Bueckers, as obviously come April, her time at UConn will be done, and it'll be time to start thinking about her legacy here. How important is a title to her legacy as you start to think about what that looks like?
Yeah, Gino raised some eyebrows, I know, a couple of weeks ago. In fact, I asked him the question about her legacy and where she might fit on the Mount Rushmore of UConn.
Mhm.
And, you know, you could say, and she said it 5 minutes after he said the opposite, that, if you don't have a championship, you're not really part of the crowd at UConn, right? If you don't win a championship, you're not, you're not, you can't, and yeah, there's no question winning a championship makes you more complete than if you don't.
Mhm.
Winning a championship is better than not winning one. Winning two is better than winning one. Going undefeated is better than having one loss.
Yeah.
Breaking a record is better than not breaking one. But, I think you have to realize she's played in a different era of women's basketball where there are more good teams
Mhm.
and more good players out there. And she hasn't necessarily had 4 or 5 All-Americans constantly playing teams all the way to the finals that don't have any.
Right.
Um, so I think, what I think the phrase I used was that we have to stop asking what if and appreciate what is. She's been a tremendous player for UConn. And if she does cap it off with a championship, and I would not bet against that, they're very capable of that. That would be great. She would certainly belong as an all-time great then. But if she falls a little bit short, she certainly deserves to be among the stars who've ever played at UConn because she's
Yeah.
had that kind of career and that kind of impact. The era that you play in, this kind of came up at the baseball writers dinner the other day, how Don Mattingly only got one chance to play in the playoffs in
Yeah.
all of his years with the Yankees. So is he an all-time great like Lou Gehrig or DiMaggio or Mantle? Well, you look at the era that he played in, and for one thing, you had all the teams, but there was no wild card
Right.
when he played. And you go back and look it up. he would have been in the playoffs 9 times under the current system.
Yeah. So
Who knows what he might have done in the
right.
postseason? So the era that you play, and what not only on your team, Don Mattingly didn't have, Whitey Ford or the great Ron Guidry or people like that with him. Paige Bueckers doesn't have. Look at the 16 team, and
Right.
you had both
Back.
Stewie and Nafisa
Yeah.
team, and 4 or 5 others who were like WNBA All Stars. Paige has never quite. She's actually had that kind of personnel, but they've always been hurt,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
she's been hurt.
Yeah.
But now she's got Strong, she's got Fudd, she's got Griffin, and I alluded to this also recently. All those injuries that UConn had and the pandemic has now created a roster where they have Sarah Strong at 18 and
And
Aubrey Griffin at 23, 24.
yeah.
You have all these players together at one time because of that backlog created by the
Yeah.
injuries and the extra eligibility. So maybe UConn will reap the rewards for all the suffering of injuries that they've had the last few years.
They're definitely they're due some luck in that department there. I'll wrap this part of it by asking you the same question on the men's side. If this women's team is going to win the title, it'll be because
They stay healthy.
yeah,
They get
that
healthy and stay healthy. Because,
before
and I'll
we
say that, by the way,
yeah,
because I think they have the answer for anything that comes up
yeah,
if they stay healthy.
no,
I
agreed.
think they could have an answer for Hidalgo if they see her again. They could have an answer for Juju Watkins if they see her again.
Hmm. Yeah, it'll be a fun couple
Mhm.
months here as we see these men's and women's teams play out. I know. I just want to briefly touch since we haven't spoken since the bowl game about UConn football and the success that they've had this season. I know it might have been a little bit of a surprise to some the extent, but just your thoughts on what they were able to accomplish this year.
Well, you can argue forever whether that bowl game means anything or what it means, but whether or not it was a great win for UConn, it was certainly a great day for UConn.
Hmm.
To be in that game and to play in a big city in that stadium, a game a lot of people were watching on TV, to show that they could bring that number of fans there.
Yeah,
I was talking to somebody from the Yankees the other night about UConn bringing 27,000 fans to Fenway. And they were like, taken aback because they didn't have anywhere near that many for their game.
yeah,
So, if you had UConn there instead of Nebraska, you
uh,
know, it would have been some game. You would have a crowd. I think UConn showed a lot of things to a lot of people, and I think the fact that if North Carolina didn't want to be there and a lot of their players opted out and they didn't care about the game, the fact that Jim Mora had his players
dialed
ready,
in. Yeah,
dialed in, even the players who were in the portal played in the game.
yeah,
A guy who was going to transfer evidently played in the game and was the defensive MVP. That's only a credit to him and what he's been able to do for UConn football. So I think everything was a real positive, and they're positioned to do some things because they're going to get transfers. They're going to get guys who are lost in the shuffle in power conferences. They're going to get guys who are undervalued from the lower
yeah,
conferences, and they can offer a lot of things. And guys coming in on a transfer, what do they care if the stadium's 20 miles away?
yeah.
I mean, they're going to come in and play here. I think a key though for them is going to be getting the right quarterbacks coach to replace Brad Robbins, because if you're
Hmm.
going to get a game changer at that position in the portal, you got to have a coach that's known for developing. So
Yeah.
you need to keep an eye on that. That's going to be a crucial hire for Jim in the next couple of months.
What was it like for you? Because for me, just as someone who's a consumer of media, it seemed like for the past decade or so, UConn football just nationally has been a punching bag for columnists, other writers. But for the first time, it seemed this year the page started to flip a little bit, and you're actually seeing some positive stories. And obviously, the play on the field has a big impact on that. But just from your perspective, what did you see in just kind of flipping the narrative on this program around?
Well, I think the moment Jim Mora walked in the door, he got people to stop laughing at UConn.
Hmm.
I mean, there's no question about that. And the first year, Don't forget they beat Boston College, they beat Liberty when they were ranked, they
Yeah.
beat Fresno State when they were 23-point underdogs, and they did all of that with a lot of injuries and a true freshman quarterback.
Yeah.
Um, the second year was kind of a down. I think they were a little bit caught by surprise by NIL and the portal. They weren't quite ready to capitalize on it.
Yeah.
But now he's shown this year what he can do in a big way. And I think it says it's important. He's not whining about the state of college football and the portal and NIL. He's saying this is what I got to deal with, and this is how I'm going to deal with it.
Hmm.
And that's what an NFL coach, by the way, does.
Yeah.
You take what you got and you make the most of it. And if you got to put a different team together every year, you do it. So, he gives the program a credibility that has made a lot of the punchlines go away.
Yeah.
And it starts there. Coaching matters. It starts there. What happened to UConn men's basketball the minute Dan Hurley walked in? Coaching matters. It starts
Hmm.
there. And even in a sport with 100 people on the roster, coaching matters.
Yeah.
So he's done a tremendous job, and they had, I thought, a really good year. They beat every group of five team that they played, including some that went to bowl games or some that were up near the top of their league, like Buffalo.
Oh, yeah.
Then they beat a Power Five team, and they were darn close to beating. They weren't really as close to Duke or Syracuse as the scores indicated, but they were certainly. I think they outplayed Wake Forest. They really had a chance to win that one. So I think they've shown. I mean, if you're the ACC, you need to take a look at UConn and say, boy, they could really help our basketball product,
Mm.
and I don't think they would hurt their football product. And if we want to try to get back in the power conference game,
Yeah.
this might be a move that we need to make. So,
Yeah.
I think they've you can't play yourself into a conference in one season or one game, but I feel like they've really positioned themselves pretty well.
Yeah, no, I think probably going into kind of the off seasons as you head towards the summer, this is probably the best position they've been when it comes to talking about conference realignment in a while, given the bounce back year for football. But Dom, I appreciate you hopping on today. I know we had a lot to cover there, and we didn't even get to your Hall of Fame ballot. We'll get to that next time. We'll have you back on closer to baseball. We'll cover that and get to all that fun stuff because it looks like it'll be another fun year for UConn baseball too. So we'll
Yeah, I
have
think so.
we'll have a lot of stuff to talk about then. So Dom, as always, really appreciate it. And thanks so much for coming on.
You got it, Jared, anytime.